What is wrong with me? This is absurd and not in a good way.
It's performance. It is what it is.
But this is like the only difference is that we're recording. Like this is what you and I do every freaking day.
This is not. This is there's a little bit of difference. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast of the Nerds. I'm Ian,
and I'm Jack.
Jack. Something feels different about this podcast. I can't quite put my finger on what feels different about what we're doing this time. What is that?
I don't know, man. It feels very different to me. Very, very different. I don't know. What do you think's going on here?
Now, it's funny. I know you've listened to one or two of the podcasts, but I was talking to a mutual friend of ours, and she said, I really can't listen to it. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, I just feel like it's like this. We realize there's this uncanny valley territory for anyone who's friends with me, where you feel like you should be having that conversation with me specifically. So me having sort of a one-sided conversation with no one. Right. I mean, not with no one. I'm having it with them, the people that are listening to us right now.
Sure.
Creates this kind like emotional dissonance that makes it weird. Did you find that when you were ever listening to the podcast?
A little bit, yeah. And I also find it with the guides. My experience of the guides changed dramatically when we became friends. Like, I still watch them and I enjoy them, but just like knowing you on a personal level, because you and I, we're quite close.
Yes.
So it is kind of an uncanny valley thing, I guess. I don't know how else to put it.
But I like that challenge, right? Because that means that I have to work twice as hard to get you with the outros, because you know it's coming. You know me.
Yeah. Oh boy, the outros. The outros. Oh boy.
It's weird.
Or the outros, shall we say?
There's two. The first time. So. Well, hold on just one sec. Hi, everyone. How are you doing? So, one of the things that I've talked about in the past couple of podcasts is the idea that it needs to remain something that is... it can't go away. I think that there is some value in this conversation that passion of the nerd, that identity or whatever that is, has with you directly, and sort of the medium for that has been me. But I've been talking recently about making sure that it's sort of low-hanging fruit and easier and accessible and so forth. And one of the ways that I thought that would be easier to do is through you, Jack. So
here we are, my friend.
Here we are. So you and I are friends. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But for anyone who's not familiar with Jack, or who saw the last video and was like, "Did Jack die?"
Hi, I'm Jack, and
he's not dead.
I'm not dead. No. And I'm a Libra, and I like long walks on the beach.
Oh, you're gonna get to know this sexy beast.
But as many of us in this community, I'm a big fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, of course.
You don't say.
Yeah, just a little bit. It might be, one of the greatest TV shows of all time, if not the greatest. But and I'm kind of I guess shall we talk about how we met?
Just a minute. So the other thing that I want to, part of the continuing conversation is going to be with Jack and I speaking with you all directly. I don't want to lose that interaction. But Jack has been editing content for the YouTube channel for a while now. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And you're a moderator in the live streams. You've produced some of my recordings. You're someone I go to when I'm feeling weird or crappy about a script, and I'm like, I need validation. Tell me that it's good.
I always say that a big part of my role is to stop you from having an existential crisis and melting down and burning it all to the ground.
Yeah, there have been a couple of times when we're done with the Facebook group. I'm not doing this anymore. No, Ian, everything's okay. Take a breath.
Yeah.
Okay, Jack.
Exactly.
So this feels like a very natural fit to me, but I understand that the people listening may be less familiar with you, and it's going to take some time, and there will be a little bit of adjustment. Today on the podcast, Jack and I are going to be talking about, we're going to start with the Guise Will Be Guys video. I published that a week ago, and I mean, just one of the things I like to do is talk about process and sort of the evolution of that, the videos as they go up. Then I have spoken to you guys about the List of Shame project that Jack and I have been doing. But now that you're actually here, Jack, I thought we could do a summary, try and keep them quick, of all of the ones we've been through so far.
And then after that, we'll be talking about fear and the management of fear.
Ah, yes.
Yes.
Which seems prescient and relevant to kind of what's going on right now.
Yes.
That actually relates to, I mean, it's an interesting connection to Guise Will Be Guys, right? Because, I mean, arguably, I mean, we'll get into it in a minute, but arguably, like, none of us has any cause to be afraid of bears anymore, which is really what our fear center was created for, was don't stick your hand in the fire, don't do this, don't do that.
That's exactly right.
And now
it's sorry?
No, go ahead.
It's just a leftover evolutionary thing that's designed to either get us out of danger or to prevent ourselves from putting ourselves in danger.
Yeah. And now it kind of goes haywire for a lot of people. Certainly me. I mean, I'm Captain Anxious Neurotic.
And I mean, have you met me?
I have. And yes. I think you're neat. But
thanks, man.
We'll talk more about that in a second. So, and that's one thing I was looking forward to in this. That's your segment. You wanted to have a conversation about that. So we'll be talking about fear management, really, is what it is. Yeah. After that, before Jack and I both say goodnight to you, Jack's going to go away, and I'm going to do our fanfic reading. Here Is Gone by Terri Botta. It's been too long, and I may actually, I mean, I keep saying I'm going to put out a 2-chapter video, but I think I just need to be happy with what I get recorded and what I get put out to you, the audience, as I do. Okay, so Jack, for the uninitiated, who are you, and how did we meet?
Okay, well, again, I'm Jack, and we've been friends for 5 going on 6 years now, and
yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and so as I said, I'm a big fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I started watching it when it was airing, and sorry, I just got a weird sound in my headphones.
Oh, that's okay. This is your first podcast. Jack.
Yes.
I like this is they're my accountability buddies, and I like to keep this relationship honest. And so if we're being honest, you're a little nervous.
Yes, I am. Very, very much so. Very, very much so.
Is there any freedom in just disclosing that and saying it up front?
Oh, a ton. I already feel like a weight is lifted off me. Yeah. So
they already like you. Trust me.
Yeah, I'm okay. I have pretty eyes and great hair.
Your hair you could get lost in.
But how do we move on from that?
How do you segue?
Yeah. Yeah, so I started watching Buffy when it was airing. I was like 10 or 11 years old. And I'd seen all of the high school episodes. So that's season 3. And then from season 4 onwards, I'd seen a little bit and sort of like, but sort of, I think at that time, it changed time slots here in the land down under. And I think I might have switched networks, and I kind of sort of fell away from it, I guess. And then probably 7 years ago now or so, I decided to watch the whole series from start to finish, and I absolutely adored it, of course. And I'm actually really glad that I waited until I was an adult, because so much of that would have went over Jack's, like, little Jack's head, and I just wanted to be like, oh yeah, pretty girls fighting and killing monsters, cool.
It's a different experience for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I jumped on the old youtube.com, and like I just knew that there was more than meets the eye with that show, and I wanted to find somebody, namely Ian, I guess, who was discussing the show and like digging into it and figuring out what it was all about. And at first, all I could find was reactors who were like, yeah, that Cordelia chick's really hot, and no shade thrown at reactors. I watch a couple myself, but it just wasn't what I was looking for. And then I found you, Ian, my dear wonderful friend. Yeah. And
it's so funny to me because I mean, I just wanted to pretend. Sorry, that's my weekly reminder to turn off your phone, Ian, because you're doing a recording right now in front of people. I wanted to pretend that I was just writing this stuff and making a little video and putting it on the internet, and if it got 100 views, okay, cool, maybe those were bots. And then so hearing the journey from the other end to the channel is always interesting to me.
Yeah. And yeah, I don't remember what the first video I saw was. I really wish I could remember, but I know at the time I found the channel, you were in the middle of season 2, so pretty early on. And then from there, because I am an egregious fanboy, and if you make something I like, you can guarantee that I'm going to find a way to contact you and tell you that I like what you do. And that's kind of how this bromance started.
So you started messaging me through the Facebook page, and it was long. Yeah.
Everybody who knows me says exactly the same thing. Like, everybody. I type and I type and I type and I don't mean it, but I just do.
And and I was sort of, I don't think that I've gotten comfortable with the fact that people actually listen to this until I started going to Comic-Cons and meetings, people directly. Or people coming up to me and saying that they love the channel and can they get a picture together and stuff like that. So, well, that was odd. Yeah. No, sorry, the Skype just took a picture. So it wasn't that it was long. It was very kind. It was super kind. And I was definitely going through a stage of... glad you enjoyed it.
Good old imposter syndrome.
Well, yeah, definitely. And then you messaged me again after another video.
I did, yeah.
And I was like, glad you enjoyed it. And then, everyone who listens to this podcast is well aware that Ian liketh the beverage, enjoyeth the adult beverage. And with our time delay being what it is, I think, you're 14 hours ahead of me?
Something like that. I mean, it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon here right now.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, and I'm approaching midnight. So, up late one night, too much wine to drink. You happened to send a message while I was sitting there, and I got the notification. and then
Oh,
I
okay.
responded, and then you responded, and we started going back and forth like that.
Yeah.
And then a couple days later, we had another chat, and then another chat, and then
Yeah, I think that went on for several months, I think. And then one day you just added me on Facebook from your personal account. And
that's
yeah,
that's a big act of bravery for me.
very, especially back then.
Yeah.
Especially back then.
A lot of fear and anxiety.
Yeah.
When connecting.
You might have, when you added me, you might have even also had a little Dutch courage, shall we call it?
Oh yeah, I'm sure there was a lot of that early on, and especially with our time difference. And then I think I asked you to be a moderator in the live streams, and kind of went from there. You started editing patron bonuses.
Yeah, I rocked up to a live stream one day and you were just like, oh, I need a moderator and Jack's here. I know him. And yeah, so that was sort of the first role.
Did I
guess,
just promote
that I
you
had.
during the stream?
Yeah, it was very sporadic. It wasn't planned or anything.
Well, that doesn't sound like me.
And then yeah, we just talked a lot, and then about I told you how I was interested in video production and how I was trying to learn and all that stuff. And you, being the lovely, kind, amazing person you are, you sort of took me under your wing and showed me the ropes. And yeah, as you mentioned, I started editing a bunch of Patreon bonuses, the readings, and that's been a ton of fun and something that's really helped me grow as an editor, I guess.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun. I mean, they're a lot of fun to record. They're fun to make. You wouldn't know it based on our output, which we mutually take responsibility for.
We're sorry.
We're so
really
sorry.
But we're working on it. We really are.
Yeah.
And we'll talk a bit about that at the end.
Yeah, we're going to deliver some today that are done. So let's move this along.
Shall we?
We're gonna. So we published the Guise Will Be Guys video a week ago, and unfortunately, that video is a testament to my normal convoluted, torturous, procrastination-laden writing process. So I mean, obviously, the whole motivating factor here is to get to one video every 2 weeks, and now I'm on Fool for Love, so good luck with that. But I scoped, guys. I thought, okay, I'm gonna start scoping videos, so I figured out how many recorded minutes there are per page of an essay, so that I could say, okay, well, if I want Guise Will Be Guys to be 12 minutes long, that's going to be about 5-6 pages. And then in my head, I don't have to spin so hard, because I can go, okay, well, some videos just need to be a review. Like, I'm just not going to have a lot to say about Where the Wild Things Are, or Go Fish, or Connor. I don't want the season 4 videos to just be me complaining about how frustrating that season is. And then a couple of things happened. First of all, while we were waiting, I finished a game with a friend of mine, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. And Hellblade is about...
It's beautiful.
Yes, Hellblade is about a woman who descends into Viking hell with the head of her lover to retrieve his soul from hell. Because of the way he was killed, his soul went to Hela instead of to Valhalla. And the game deals with mental illness, the game deals with abuse, the game deals with a few different things. In the game, I don't want to spoil any of it, because I guess it's one of my favorite games of all time.
Same.
Yeah. But her monsters are all... There's a design to everything that's happening in the game. So as she walks around, she can hear voices in her head. You, the player, hear voices in the headphones, and those are the voices she's subjecting herself to while she's trying to find her way through this area. And then the monsters are specifically motivated. And then after we finished the game, this friend and I, we had a conversation about they structured this entire thing about abuse, the way Senua carries the damage from her abuse, and what all the monsters mean, and all of this were about mental health and being a survivor of those kinds of experiences. And I was really struck by it. And Wesley is one of my favorite Angel characters in the series, and the thing that I was left with from Hellblade was the way in which abuse sometimes causes its victim in that. Okay, I don't like to use that word too much when it comes to that conversation, but into their own abuser. And I started thinking about the way that works in terms of memory and in terms of, even if your abuser is gone, the memories and the things that we make them mean continue to torture us over time. And so I started to think about Wesley, and you and I were having a conversation, Jack, where I said, is it just me or does Wesley seem like a survivor of abuse? And we looked at some dialogue specifically in the episode, and we both kind of felt like, I think the evidence of it is there.
Yeah, there's enough there to back it up for sure. He's dealing with trauma from his past.
Yeah, and then I thought about, Untouched very specifically brought up the idea of abuse because of what Darla was doing to Angel this season. And then, so I went back and revisited Untouched, and I caught Angel's and Bethany's conversation in the episode in a way that I hadn't before. So the scene that's in the video features a crash cut at the end of it, where Bethany says, I wish I could see people. I'd love to see people the way you do. And then there's one of those angels cuts to Darla and Angel having sex on a pile of bodies or something like that. And the crash cut, so I think in watching the episode, wipes out the experience of the conversation between the two of them. It's this very nice. So I started considering the conversation in a bubble. And to me, it was about what I was talking about in the episode, being able to, the idea of mirrors, the idea of reflections, and seeing people in our lives in a way that they cannot see themselves. And from there, it just kind of started to come together. I remembered I talked about mirrors in Somnambulist. And that whole, it was like a very weird experience. Sometimes the conclusions just come to me. It's writing for a minute or two and out pops the conclusion. This was like chip away at the idea, find connections, find all of that.
Yeah. I remember at the beginning of the process, you weren't quite sure of where to go and how to approach it, and you certainly found it the more you got into it. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, that's always a thing, right? Is every essay needs a perspective. I mean, there's I would say that 12% of the video is a review. Yeah. The rest of it is an examination of theme and character and kind of a celebration of all of that. So, and I'll talk about Fool for Love, which is the one I'm working on. The other thing that was kind of coinciding is it seems like everyone around me, including myself, are all kind of going through something strange. I don't know if this is a phenomena that is across the board or if this is just something that I've noticed with the people in my personal life. But ever since the quarantine started, there was like a month or two of just high coping mechanisms, high all sort of like being afraid or whatever. But the thing that I've noticed right now is that it seems like a lot of the people, before that, it's not an uncommon phenomenon to say, I'm going to write that novel. I'll start next week, or to want to make a connection or to want to have a conversation or whatever, and to sort of kind of put it off because comfort breeds apathy, right? But if there's one thing we've all been since March, it's pretty uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's putting it gently.
Yeah. And so I think personally I've noticed in the phenomena coming back around again, where everyone is just like, you know what? Fuck it. I just want a little piece of joy. I want to be a little happy. I want to be a little whatever. So
Amen, bro.
Amen. Yeah, like there's been a lot of people close to me that I've seen being brave or having to deal attacking insecurity in a way that they wouldn't have normally, or a way they would have ignored normally, and just being like, you know what, I deserve to be happy, and kind of tackling it. And I think that has fed into this, that fed into that script and that examination where, I'm dating, and our time together is unlike anything I've experienced with anyone else before. And I think, like right now in the situation too, it's been a while for me, and so a lot of these mechanisms and this anxiety and these neuroses and things like that, this imposter syndrome that I was talking about, and it keeps popping up, while we're spending time together. And I'm just over it. Maybe it's turning 40, maybe it's the whole deal, but I'm just like, I'm just tired of that spin cycle in my own head and not allowing myself to be happy, right? And so acknowledging that, saying any of these things doesn't make them go away, but that process of acknowledging, I've had enough of this, and just trying to sort of let things go so that I can be present and happy in the moment, and so that I can show up for her and be there when someone else needs me, as opposed to just feeding on this sort of selfish. I mean, we're all selfish. Selfish is an unfair.
It's not.
It doesn't apply. I think
I mean, we all have to be a little selfish at some point to look after ourselves. It's an essential component of being a human being.
Yeah, and that's something I've kind of has been a part of the process of this podcast, is like self-care, taking 2 days off, all of that. So I think selfish gets a bad rap, but being sort of exclusively so and exclusively wrapped up upstairs, including in your own self-hatred, as opposed, because like my self-hatred or my torture and anxiety and all that has nothing to do with her, right? And while I'm doing all of that, I'm also not showing up for her and being present with her. And it's not just about feeling the joy and of the spending time together. It's like,
trying to think 2 steps ahead and all of that stuff, and
being so afraid to fail or to make a mistake or to say the wrong thing or any of those things that you actually just check yourself out. You create the problem that you're afraid of instead of just being with a person and having a conversation. Anyway,
stop trying to control everything and just let go.
Yes, I've heard you say that many times in the past week or two.
Yeah. For those who don't know, that's a quote from Fight Club. Ty Durden says it to the narrator character, and
Jack.
It's something that's
No, Jack. I am Jack's.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I don't think his name is actually Jack, though. If you look at the script, they call him the narrator. But I don't
Well,
know.
it's convenient.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
But yeah. Sorry.
no, yeah, no, all
Tangent.
good. Anyway, all of those factors kind of circled around, and what came out was Guys Will Be Guys.
And it was wonderful. A wonderful.
Those things started coming together. Our conversation occurred. You let me read you. Like I said, does this make sense? And I read you most of that outro.
Yeah.
And of course, since you were part of the inspiration for what I wrote, I think that's the first video I've dedicated, other than the Patreon readings. But I didn't mean for people to think that you were dead, Jack.
Yeah, no, I'm not dead, and I'm doing okay. Yeah, that dedication floored me. I mean, we were actually in a Skype call watching the premiere together, and so like we're watching the outro, and I'm sort of like tearing up just from the outro itself, because I mean it hits pretty close to home for me, and then the words popped up on screen, and I'm like, and I cried even more, and then I was like literally speechless. I didn't know what to say other than thank you. That's all I could really muster to say there. But yeah, like as you said, we talked about the essay, and yeah, you were writing about themes that were very close to me, I guess, and you know, just to get a little personal for a second. Yeah, I've kind of always struggled with things like self-esteem and knowing my own worth and all of those kinds of things, and I guess I've spent a lot of time kind of blaming myself when people have mistreated me or treated me poorly and whatnot. And I've always seen it as like a problem with me rather than a problem with the other person when they treat me poorly, or you know, didn't love me, or like ditched me, or whatever, you know. Rather than like seeing it as like a reflection of them and whatever they are going through at the time, I would always really take it on board and sort of beat myself up with it endlessly. Which I've spent I mean, you've heard this story like a hell of a lot.
That's kind of, I mean, that's kind of been up for me personally too lately. Is like I definitely have the abandonment fear plus desire to appease, and you know, there's that constant, persistent. Something goes wrong. I don't know about you personally, but something goes wrong. I go, no matter what. Maybe they're right. Maybe I did something. Maybe I did this thing that maybe I can fix it. Maybe I can, you know.
Me too, man.
And one of the things I talked about in a Medium article I wrote was like the way my dad handled conflict was to just stop talking. You know, and if you're a kid, if you're a teenager and you don't understand what happened, you start making up answers to the question, what happened? What did I do wrong? So it actually fostered that spin cycle of maybe I said this thing, or maybe I said the wrong thing, or maybe I did this, or maybe I did that. And on the other side of things, there's this weird fear that if I stop doing that, then it's this descent into narcissism that then I become unreachable. Then I stop growing. Then I stop, if I make a mistake and I can't see it and own it and do any of this, then, you know, the relationships will fall away and I'll die alone.
Yeah. Yeah, and man, it's a difficult thing to pull yourself out of. I mean, I'm a lot better than I used to be, but I've still got a bit of work to do myself. It's hard, man.
Finding the balance, like, knowing your worth. I mean, that's kind of the whole thing. It's like, know your worth, right?
That's exactly what it is. And yeah, the longer you also wrestle with those feelings, the harder they are to shrug off as well. And yeah, but I mean, like I always say, man, if there is life, there is hope. So I mean, if you're alive, you've still got time to change, time to grow, and yeah, try to get better and be better.
Yeah, there's a weird. There's two things. One thing a while ago that I started to realize, and another thing recently, which is like, I definitely resist that I'm a meat sack.
Yeah,
like
you definitely you have a propensity to overanalyze and try and intellectualize the things, I should say.
Well, it's not just that. I definitely live in my head, but what you were talking about, the more you believe something, or the more you anxiety actually, I think, gets stickier the more time you spend with it.
Yeah.
And that's just, something that I don't think I realized I couldn't intellectualize my way out of. Because brain pathways that you travel down over and over and over again get thicker and stronger and all of that. And so when you start trying to think a new way, it's a lot of work to notice yourself going down the old pathway and say, oh, I'm not going to do that, and
I'm suddenly reminded of a quote from the first season of American Horror Story. The father character says, the more you fear something, the more power you give it.
Yeah.
And I firmly believe that. Like, it's very true.
That's very apropos of the third segment we're going to have today.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Yes, indeed.
Was there anything else you want to say about that before we move on?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess just thank you, like that, that really meant a lot to me. And, you've always seen the good in me, and you've always tried to make me see it myself, even though I've been kicking and screaming and throwing tantrums the whole freaking time. But you've helped me a lot, and our friendship is you've helped me grow, is what I will say. And yeah, I appreciate that, man, and I love you.
I love you too. The other, I mean, just being trusting and vulnerable with someone else, especially when you've dealt with damage, is an act of bravery. So, like, just being willing to open up and to hear some of the things that you and I talk about, I know takes a lot. So it's not all me.
Yeah. I feel you, man. I feel you.
All right, so we're going to run through a quick review for each of the movies we've watched so far with the List of Shame project. I don't remember how we got... I think so you and I were just looking for a reason to hang out on the regular.
Brightburn was the first kind of thing that we watched together, but it wasn't on the list. I don't think the list had been compiled at this point.
It hadn't. But I think when we watched this movie, I brought up the idea of, I've been meaning to watch classic films for years, and you said, all right, I'm into it. And so we consider Brightburn the beginning of this project, even though it doesn't belong on this list.
Yeah.
Brightburn, Dark Superman, it's a horror movie. I thought it was okay.
That's all you have?
That's all I got on Brightburn. It was okay.
Okay. I really liked it as a horror fan. I mean, story-wise, it's a little basic, and it's heavily, like,
it's horror.
It heavily borrows from Superman. Yeah. Like, I'm surprised DC hasn't sued. Like,
yeah.
But it really appealed to the horror fan in me, and the sort of over the top horror spectacle of it, and even like as a horror fan, there are even a few scenes that I found really gruesome. I had to look away because it's intense.
But, it's you know what it is to me is it's a supernatural slasher film. It's,
Right,
I mean,
yeah.
he's not really that different than Freddy Krueger. And I think that's the reason why I'm ambivalent about it, is I wanted
Right.
him to be morally tortured. And instead he's more controlled by the... There's never a
Yeah.
moment when you feel like he could have turned out differently than he did.
Exactly. That's why like the plot to me felt a little basic, and just like it could have been a lot better. It was more or less like they had like a meeting, that the filmmakers had a meeting. They're like, okay, bad Superman, what do we do? And then they just threw a bunch of spaghetti against the wall and made the movie out of it. And I liked it though, and I do recommend it if you're into horror and you would like to see a dark take on the Superman story.
Yeah. What do we watch next?
The next one was Edge of Tomorrow from 2014. It was directed by the director of The Bourne Identity, Doug Liman, and starring Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt. And it was essentially Groundhog Day with aliens, right?
Yep.
I enjoyed it. I mean, it's a very decent and well-made action flick. And there's some like non-linear storytelling elements
By
that
nature,
I quite
yeah.
enjoyed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, I'd recommend it too.
Yeah. Incredibly entertaining popcorn film was kind of what I thought of that movie. After that, we watched... This is really the first... the way we composed...
This was the beginning of the list.
Yeah, well, the way we composed the list was, it wasn't just classic films that one or both of us hadn't seen, but personal favorites that one or the other had not seen too. And so that's how Edge of Tomorrow got on that list. Was I think it's a really fun movie, and I thought, why don't we watch it? And out of 200 and something movies on the list, we pulled at random, and we got Edge of Tomorrow first.
Yeah.
Which was weird and ridiculous, because the next movie was Some Like It Hot, 1959. Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon hide from the mob as women in a traveling band with Marilyn Monroe. Jack and I both struggled with it until the very last joke, which retroactively made us enjoy the entire thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It felt like a bit of a slog for most of it. Like there's some decent but kind of dated humor, kind of like slapsticky kind of stuff.
Well, it's a genre we just don't see a lot of anymore, and I didn't realize we were watching that genre while we were.
Right. I basically knew nothing about it going in.
Yeah. It's a farce.
Yeah.
Which is its own kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's a little like reaching for your water and getting Coke.
Yeah.
You know, that experience of like not your palate not being properly calibrated.
Yeah. Yeah, but as you said, the very last line at the end was incredibly funny, and it really elevated the entire film for me. And I haven't watched it since, but I would gladly do so. And yeah, I'd recommend it if you have a taste for classic campy films. It's just good, silly fun, really.
Agreed.
Yeah. Next, we watched Lawrence of Arabia from 1963.
Yes.
It's a somewhat biographical piece directed by David Lean and starring the late, great Peter O'Toole. And it's about the real-life T.E. Lawrence, and it consists mostly of his experiences through World War One. This was another slog for me. Like, oh my god. The first 40 minutes or so, I was invested, but after that, it just becomes slow, and if I'm being honest, by the end, I just couldn't wait for it to be
now,
over.
I should say that we decided, there was a decision that we had to make early on, which was, do we watch these with context, or do we watch them without context and then seek context afterwards, right? So, I shared our experience with this movie. So there are two parts to the movie. There's an overture that is like 7 minutes long. Maybe it just felt 7 minutes long. And then there's an intermission. And then there's the second part of the movie. And we both enjoyed the first part of the movie and found the second half of the movie narratively confusing and weirdly structured.
It's
Go ahead.
yeah, it went for almost 4 hours. I believe I looked up the runtime yesterday. But I mean, in defense of it's got some beautiful cinematography.
It's got to be one of the prettiest movies I've ever seen.
Yeah. And I can't help but think that maybe if I was around in 1963, I really would have liked it. But I don't know. I mean, it's not that I dislike old movies. It's just that storytelling has evolved since then, right? So
I mean, that's always the trick, right? Is storytelling. Everything evolves. Storytelling evolves. Cinematography evolves. Structure evolves. Editing evolves. Things, I'm not going to say get better, but they change. They evolve over time, and so. You know, I think you and I both have specific hooks that we look for in a particular thing, and they just weren't there for Lawrence. But I talked to a mutual friend of ours about Lawrence of Arabia after, and shared the experience that you and I had with her. And she talked about Omar Sharif, who I believe was the first Egyptian actor in American television. Yeah, and so that the movie was very celebrated and featured in her household as a part of that. And also, she said we made a huge mistake watching it back to back.
Yeah. She said that to me as well.
Absolutely agree with. Yeah,
totally agree. Totally agree, because my brain was just mush by the end of it.
I still have issues with the structure of the narrative in part two. And maybe that's because it's structured more like an epic or a history rather than a story that has a climax. I think the climax gets...
Yeah, it doesn't flow very well, and the climax feels like it's well before the end of the film, at least for me.
But we still...
And it's also...
We just run an issue. Sometimes it probably would be better to get context before we start watching the film.
Yeah,
but I think you and I decided that we didn't want to spoil things for ourselves, and we just kind of wanted to have the first initial experience.
And we're like you and I, we're basically film nerds, and so we want to experience the films and what they have to offer. And then like I enjoy after we watch something, we spend time researching it, we find out interesting bits and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So after that, we went on to Spartacus, 1960, directed by Stanley Kubrick. It does not feel like it's directed by Stanley Kubrick, except for one part of it. Trailblazer in the genre that we both thought now has been remade a few times with better, more entertaining versions. Again, because editing evolves, special effects evolve, acting evolves. Acting is much more naturalistic now, as opposed to acting for the cheap seats. Fight choreography has gotten better, so forth. I personally do love the place the movie holds in American history. The movie was written by a writer who was blacklisted during the McCarthy era, Dalton Trumbo. And there's a wonderful movie about Trumbo starring Bryan Cranston called Trumbo, if you haven't seen it. And talks about him writing under pseudonyms and so forth after he was blacklisted because he was a communist in the 50s and 60s. And Kirk Douglas actually just hired Trumbo to fix the script, punch everything up, and then said, "We're putting your name on it. I don't care." So Kirk Douglas just kind of resisted all of the political pressure to not put his name on. I believe Trumbo also wrote Roman Holiday, which was, but it was published for and won the Academy Award for writing under the name of a friend of his. But anyway, I thought Spartacus was entertaining. There was at least an emotional moment in it that we both got hooked, which I was like,
That was right at the end, right?
Right at the end, in the last 20 minutes when he's made to duel again.
Yeah.
And the winner of the duel gets crucified, which was like, so they're trying to kill their friend to put them out of misery so they don't have to be crucified.
Yeah. for me, like, contrary to Lawrence of Arabia, it held my attention a lot better.
Yeah.
Even though it's from the same like era of cinema as Lawrence of Arabia, but
Yeah, Lawrence was 3 years after Spartacus.
yeah, yeah. So I kind of like, what am I trying to say here? It was more I mean, Ian, as you said, like the acting has come a long way. It's more natural now, and for me, it was very apparent watching this that, oh, I'm watching an old film, because the acting I just couldn't really get immersed in it, because it just wasn't, it just didn't feel real to me. But again, it's another beautifully shot film for the most part, and yeah, I guess I mean it feels like it's lacking a bit, and it feels dated, but it wasn't terrible by any means.
Now I'm going to accelerate us just a little bit here. After that, we watched Gremlins 1 and 2.
They're very, very special films to me, but I know they haven't aged well at all.
There's been a couple movies. I saw Gremlins 2 in the theater. I thought it was hilarious and amazing. But after watching 1 and 2 with you together, I was like, I don't think I need to watch those ever again.
Yeah, I mean, and that kind of, because I felt the same way, and it kind of crushed me, because I was like, these were so good in my memory before I watched them. But I mean, they're still special, and they were still very good for their time. Wasn't it Jim Henson that did the Gremlins?
I don't remember, but
something. I could be wrong there. Don't quote me. But yeah, the puppets are all really well done, and yeah, I mean, it just.
2 is still better than 1, but
oh, definitely.
1 feels like a Tales from the Dark Side episode or something like that. Like
yeah,
a single idea extended too long over the course of
yeah.
And 2 is just batshit crazy gonzo.
Yeah, two really knew what it was, and it didn't try to be anything other than what it was. It's silly and crazy, and it's. Yeah, you know, there's a couple of laughs in there, and I would recommend it if you're hanging out with a bunch of friends and having a couple of drinks. Maybe put it on and have a giggle. Why
not? After that was Untouchables, a Brian De Palma crime film written by David Mamet about Kevin Costner's Elliot Ness defeating Robert De Niro's Al Capone. I think the movie holds up fine. Sean Connery is the reason to watch the movie. But it's not my favorite crime film.
Okay, yeah. I liked it. Well, actually, I liked it quite a lot, as you said. Yeah. Sean Connery was amazing. My only real issue was.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
That's me doing my Connery.
The depiction of Al Capone by Robert De Niro didn't land for me. Robert De Niro, of course, is an incredible actor, but I'm very familiar with Al Capone as a figure. I've researched him a lot and read a lot, and so I just couldn't suspend my disbelief there, because De Niro didn't look, act, or seem like Al Capone at all to me. It wasn't a bad performance; it just wasn't Al Capone.
Yeah, he was doing something, but it wasn't. He wasn't doing an impression, or wasn't looking to replicate the nuances of the man's character. What was next?
Yeah. Arrival from 2016 by the French-Canadian film Denis Villeneuve. Villeneuve. I actually looked up the pronunciation of that.
Oh, is it Villeneuve? Okay, I'll shut up.
Yeah. And it's Denis because he's French.
Yeah.
But yeah, starring Amy Adams, Jeremy Renner, who we all know and love as Hawkeye, and the legendary Forrest Whitaker. Essentially, aliens land on Earth, and the government enlists the helps of a linguistics expert to help communicate with them.
And and anything else is a spoiler.
Pretty much, yeah. I just want to say first and foremost, the least you know about this film going in, the better.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I think I can speak for the both of us when I say it's a very special film, and it's not just a movie; it's poetry, right?
It's one of my 3 favorite
gorgeous.
films of the last decade.
Yeah, it's just wonderful and beautiful, and the ending is just wow. Love it. Yeah, it's incredible.
After that, we went To Kill a Mockingbird, classic, strangely constructed American film about a trial of a black man in the 1920s South. The trial, it's 3 acts. The first and third acts are concerned with the children of Gregory Peck, who is the lawyer defending the man accused of rape in the 1920s in the South. It's a classic. It's incredible. It's also very hard to watch. And Jack, you actually yelled during the verdict, which
yes, I did.
Which
it
is
made
like,
me...
oh yeah, Jack's not an American.
I hadn't seen it, and I had a rough idea of what it was about. I knew it touched on themes of racism and whatnot. But yeah, I guess, well, yeah, yeah, that's putting it lightly. There's a. I don't want to spoil it, but there is a part concerning the verdict that was very unjust, and it made me very, very, very angry. Like I actually yelled at the screen.
The interesting thing about that is it sort of. It puts a spotlight on my own, maybe American complacency with the fact that, I think your reaction is the just and honorable one. My reaction was like, well, yeah, that was, the South, it wasn't just the South, the 1920s, and of course, present day events and police and all of that. It's like, is the movie 1962 couldn't be more... appropriate for even current times, which is this weird staggering thing to say.
Yeah, and because after the film, we always have a discussion about it, and you explained those things to me, and I was like, oh yeah, right. It's not all that surprising, is it?
Yeah,
unfortunately.
So we're running a little bit long. Let's see if we can switch to quick hits. Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Wonderful. Tim Curry is incredible. It's not my typical cup of tea. I'm not a big fan of musicals myself, but I enjoyed it as a love letter to the B-movie horror genre. That's what I'll say.
I still don't know if I liked or disliked it, but Tim Curry is that's one of the most captivating, unique performances I've ever seen in a movie.
One thing I want to add is Tim Curry's physicality in that film is incredible. Yeah. He threw himself into it 100%. It was amazing.
Miss Dr. Frankenfurter feels like he's alive and kicking someplace. Wild Strawberries, my favorite film so far.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I love the sort of surrealist art house sort of vibe. It to me, in a weird way, it reminded me of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which is one of our favorite films.
Yeah.
Beautifully shot, and it had a really nice, hopeful ending, which we didn't.
Which I was shocked at. I thought for certain. So it's about an older man touring his life and memories that he regrets. And it's told in a very visually surreal style, but it's not hard to follow, and it never gets totally abstract. It's like a Christmas Carol motif, kind of, except they're just his memories that he's exploring.
Yeah, and with a little sprinkle of Citizen Kane in a way.
Yeah, and we were both sure knew how it was going to end, and we were wrong. It ends in a hopeful, place of healing, which I really loved.
And I'm really glad that they did that too, and didn't go the sad route. Yeah.
Directed by Ingmar Bergman. It's the first Ingmar Bergman movie we've both seen, and I now really want to watch The Seventh Seal and the rest of his films. The Red Shoes.
Oh.
Yeah, definitely one we suffered through. I've summarized it previously, so we don't need to again. There's a redeeming 12 to 13 minutes in the middle of it, and the rest of it was kind of agony.
Yeah, there's a beautifully shot, again, kind of surrealist ballet sequence. Other than that, it's about a woman who doesn't have her own agency and has a bunch of dudes telling her what she should do.
Yes.
And it's I never want to see that film
Yes,
again.
there's a
And
false choice at the end she's presented with, and we were both like, no, just leave both of these asshats and do your own thing, Wendy, or whatever her name was.
And didn't Scorsese say it was one of his favorite films?
Yeah, his name's on the remaster that we watched. One of the things that we can't account for personally is like the ballet sequence in the middle is stunning. And it is very surreal the way the camera enters the stage and the ballet becomes a reality. Yeah. And it's beautiful. It's very well done. It's hard for us I didn't spend a lot of time reading about that one afterwards because I was just happy that it was over.
Yeah.
But I did read Ebert's review, and it was like it was a different movie that he had reviewed. But it's difficult for us to account for what were the breakthroughs in cinematography or what were the breakthroughs in filmmaking. We just consume these through a very modern lens. And either it connects with us emotionally or it doesn't.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's all we can do, really.
Next was Road to Perdition, a movie we both felt like revisiting. It's a 1920s crime movie starring Tom Hanks. And I think this will be the last time I watch the movie. There are 3 amazing scenes and then a bunch of Oscar bait filler long shots of great actors thinking about stuff.
Fair enough. I saw it in theaters when it first came out, but I hadn't seen it since then. And watching it again, I really liked it. And I know it dragged for you, and I don't necessarily disagree, but I was never bored watching it. But it does have that sort of Oscar bait feel of a lot of like mid to late 90s and early 2000s films, like the Shawshank Redemption and the Green Mile and all that. That sort of very similar vibe, if you know what I mean.
I think it's the movie Sam Raimi made after American Beauty. Or not Sam Raimi, the director of American Beauty, who just directed 1917.
Isn't that
Sam Mendes?
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah.
I thought it was just okay. After that, we went to
I really liked it.
Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. I don't want to talk about it, but you can.
I love this movie so much. Look, it's terrible. It's a 1978 spoof of the classic B movie horrors. It's silly and stupid and it's dumb, and that's exactly what it's meant to be. And I laughed like a maniac throughout the entire thing, and Ian sat there kind of miserable and couldn't wait for it to be over, which is okay.
I do not have the bad movie gene. I wish that I did. Why would anyone on Earth not want to have more fun? If there's some way you could have more fun, but I don't have it.
But in its defense, there were a couple of scenes where I was laughing with the movie and not at it, but there was a lot of laughing at it as well. I love it. If you haven't heard it, check out the theme song. Just search on YouTube Attack of the Killer Tomatoes theme, and it's I love it.
Yes, and tweet it at our friend Lonnie at Chipperish Media.
Definitely do. She'll love it. She'll absolutely love it.
Yes, she may even follow you. Next was Citizen Kane. Yep.
I went in it wanting to love it.
I always want to love it.
Yeah, of course.
I hate a massacre. I always want. I'm always looking. Even when we were watching The Red Shoes, like I was the last one to be like, okay, yeah, this is not.
You were pretty hopeful
I was
through all of that.
Trying so hard.
Yeah.
Attack of the Killer Tomatoes lost me immediately, but Citizen Kane's a big one.
I guess I will say that I thought that I would love it. I really did. but it just by the end it just feels like it's lacking something. I wanted to feel more than I actually felt.
I mean,
is how I would summarize it.
the way that I described the movie up front was it's a prequel to A Christmas Carol.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Now think about that. Think of how boring and not very fun that movie would be. All of the reasons why it's famous, the cinematography, the inventions in filmmaking and all that stand out. The movie is visually fascinating. It looks like a graphic novel to me, where frames are painted and drawn, and it's a beautiful film. And I did not care.
Yeah, I think it definitely deserves its place in cinema history, sure. But yeah, it just felt like it was lacking something. But in research, I found that Orson Welles was only 25 years old when he made it, and I thought that was pretty cool. I think he did pretty well for a 25-year-old director.
Well, yeah, that's ridiculous. As a 40-year-old looking at that movie, I'm like, eh? Next up was Star Trek: The Motion Picture. All 10 OG Star Trek movies are on our list. I think we had Star Trek 5, which
we did
is
5.
the only one that might be worse than the motion picture.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about Star Trek 5. Star Trek 5 actually has jokes.
Okay.
So, Star Trek: The Motion Picture is a really good 45-minute episode of the original series stretched across 2 hours.
Yep, 2 very long hours.
Yeah.
All I really want to say about it is that it was trying to be 2001: A Space Odyssey, and it wasn't.
Heavily influenced by 2001.
There's one scene in the beginning where the camera just pans around the Enterprise, and it goes for it felt like 10 minutes.
Scotty and Kirk are flying in a shuttlecraft around the Enterprise, and it goes on. And the movie is up its butt over with its special effects. Yeah, and I am a Star Trek fan.
Yeah, I can fanatic even. You love it.
I can quote The Voyage Home and the Undiscovered Country probably start to finish. But good Lord. This is the first time I'd seen the motion picture. I've seen every Star Trek movie, including Nemesis, more than once, which is agony. And this one was brutal.
But the only, I guess, slightly positive thing I'll say about it is that I think it had some good ideas that were executed very, very poorly.
It had 45 minutes of ideas stretched out into what felt like 5 hours, but it was I don't know what the actual runtime of the movie was. Next was the worst movie that we've watched in the group. Easily. The 2001 Jack Nicholson movie directed by Sean Penn, The Pledge.
I hated it.
Jack Nicholson is a police chief retiring, but there's one case about little girls being murdered that he can't let go of. And that's the setup for the story. Sounds like an interesting crime movie. I don't dislike Jack Nicholson, and we watched it with some friends, and we were all instantly hating it.
Yeah, it might be the worst editing I've seen in any film. The editing was horrible, and the cross dissolves, the freaking cross dissolves. The only reason I would watch this film again is to go back and count how many cross dissolves were in it. There was one sequence that wouldn't have been any more than 30 seconds where there was 3 cross dissolves.
Well, it wasn't one sequence, it was one shot. It was one shot that cross-dissolved into itself 3 or 4 times. And whenever you start with Final Cut Pro or Adobe Premiere, or when you start with Photoshop, the filters in Photoshop, you learn quickly to use sparingly. A cross-dissolve in a film needs to be motivated. Generally, that motivation is time passing.
Yeah, that's pretty much one of the first things you taught me about editing is cross dissolves are more or less a no-no most of the time. There's certain situations where they're okay, but they're very few and far between.
And just watching it, we couldn't figure out. I mean, okay, but if you're going to break the rule, then why?
Yeah,
And that was the thing that was missing. Is there's slow motion at random?
yeah, random.
Yeah.
Random.
Jack Nicholson was dull, and there were graphic shots of murdered little girls that to me needed to have a payoff. Like, what is the payoff? There's got to be a reason you're showing us this. There's got to be a reason you're doing this to the audience. And the way the movie ends did not justify the use of, to me, graphic murdered children.
It's another one that had me yelling at the screen quite literally. Yeah, the payoff, they tried to do a payoff, but it's one of the most unsatisfying and maddening things you'll ever see.
Yeah. Last two, they kind of go together. We watched Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, the 1980 version, and a couple of days later watched Dr. Sleep, the 2019 director's cut version. I mentioned that three movies that are my three favorite movies that I've watched in the last decade. Those are Into the Spider-Verse, Arrival, and Dr. Sleep. One of my favorite, most creative, most interesting films I've watched in the last 10 years. What did you think of the two of them?
So The Shining I had seen quite a few times as a kid, but before we watched it the other day, I hadn't seen it in probably 25 years or something, and I enjoyed it for the most part, but it is quite slow. It's not necessarily. It's not that it's not entertaining. It just drags a bit. I love and respect as a horror fan what it's done for the genre, and it's a very seminal piece for the genre. And Doctor Sleep, honestly, I think might be one of my favorite movies of all time. That blew me away. It was just creative, just
Consistently surprising.
yeah, and we talked about how it wasn't just a horror film, and that's what made it so good. There was
Yeah, I'm not a horror guy. My interest in horror is when it crosses over into other genres. So horror fantasy, horror sci-fi, you've got Alien. I mean, The Shining is an example of that. If you think of it as a relatively straightforward B-movie haunted house story as done by one of the most artistically significant directors in the history of American movies.
sure.
That's interesting. That doesn't make me love the movie, but it is a haunted house movie. That's what it is. They're in a hotel. The ghosts drive one of them insane. It's an incredibly simple plot. And in contrast to that, Dr. Sleep takes little bits of The Shining that people probably forget exist, and that is that Danny has magic powers. But it's because Kubrick treats them so ambiguously in The Shining that you're not sure actually what you're watching all the time. And Dr. Sleep literalizes those abilities and then builds an entire world about magic around Danny. As an adult played by the hot snack Ewan McGregor, who is dealing with an alcohol problem that comes on because of what he suffered from, and because he has the ability to see dead people. Imagine the Sixth Sense kid without having gotten counseling as an adult. That would be a terrifying, miserable ability to have. And it sort of revisits Kubrick's movie, but it does it in a very elegant, wonderful way. It takes the focus off of Jack Nicholson, which I think is actually a problem with The Shining, and puts it on the other characters around him. And there are several moments in Dr. Sleep where I choke up and want to cry.
Certainly, yeah. As I said, it's a horror film, but there's more to it than that. And yeah, there's one scene where Danny is speaking to an old man. I'm not going to tell you much beyond that. It literally made me tear up. It's yeah. The whole film is just scary but beautiful
Yeah.
and touching, and there's some really like artistic shots in there too. Honestly, I think it might be somewhere in my top 20 greatest films of all time. Loved it.
I mean,
I
kind of where we started out. We started with a horror movie, and we're ending with a horror movie. We started with a horror fantasy in Brightburn, and my complaint about that movie was there are never any moments where you feel like Dark Superman is going to turn out differently than he did, and there are no decisions.
And it also it didn't really make you care about any of the characters or what was going on.
Yeah.
In attempted to make you kind of feel for the little boy in a way, but then
Mostly it's told through the mother's perspective, but she makes a couple of decisions that are so frustrating. But Dr. Sleep has many decisions over the course of it. Decisions of, should I do this? Should I do that? Do I drink again? Do I not drink again? Do I quit? Do I leave these people here? Do I save them? Do I, over and over. And Danny does not always make the right decision, but you see him fighting with himself over the decisions, and you see the consequences of the decisions, and then those consequences affect his character. There's a character arc. Freddy Krueger doesn't have a character arc. Danny has an arc, and it has one of the most. Rose the Hat is one of my favorite villains.
She's incredible. The performance from I looked her up. Sorry, I can't remember her name. She was a Swedish actress, but she was incredible.
Yeah,
amazing actress.
We watched the director's cut version. I looked up what scenes are cut from the director's cut version in the theatrical version, and it's many of my favorite scenes in the movie. So if you're gonna watch it, I highly recommend the director's cut.
And just going back to what you said about the whole haunted house thing. Funnily enough, Doctor Sleep was directed by Mike Flanagan, who also did the Haunting of Hill House on Netflix. And as soon as I found that out, I was like, oh yeah, because the horror aesthetic, like the special effects and the makeup and everything, were very reminiscent of Haunting of Hill House.
And as we were watching, and a friend who was struggling with it, I said, you know what, it's really more like a season of a show than it is a movie. It does break things into chapters, and if you think of those chapters as episodes with their own arcs and their own focus and all of that, then I think the movie comes together. If you watch it, I mean, The Shining is a very singular focus, and Doctor Sleep has multiple stories of characters and camps and all of that. I didn't have a problem with it, but our friend did, and once we kind of talked about, no, it's like a season of the show, they went, oh, that makes so much more sense.
I personally think that if it was, say, a 12-episode season of the show, it could have been better in a way, because you could have explored characters a bit better and relationships and do all those things that a TV show can do. And
it's not a perfect
I guess
film.
a movie has to rush through. No, it's not perfect.
But it's so creative.
I mean, I'd say it's close to perfect, though, for me. I'd give it like a 9 out of 10. Like, it's very, very good. Very good.
Sorry, my Steam just went off. I'm going to quit that real quick. Jack, you want to take us to our last? By the way, sorry if that got super long and listy. I mean, there were a lot of things to cover there, and I tried to accelerate a little bit, but I just figured now that we have you here,
And I mean, we're film nerds, so of course, if we get to talking about film, we're gonna talk.
Yeah.
But yeah, so to finish things up, I thought it'd be good to talk a little bit about fear and more specifically the management of fear, because part of this whole thing, like Ian and I have been talking for the last couple of weeks about bringing me in as a co-host for the podcast now, and he said to me yesterday, he said, okay, so last segment, it's yours. We can do whatever the hell you want. And I'm like, oh no, oh no. And so I'm trying to think of ideas and whatnot, but I was sort of overwhelmed with.
I mean, I was throwing ideas at you. You know, top 5 sexual positions.
Yeah.
Top 3 kisses in a movie.
Yeah, and
I may be a little preoccupied by a particular topic. Go.
But yeah, I was trying to think of something, and I wasn't sure how to like lead into things and segue, and just I was overwhelmed with, I guess, nerves. Not just for coming up with the segment, but just doing this. Like I was terrified. Like but while we were setting this up, Ian, I'm just like, Ian, I'm scared. Help me.
I know, and I get into this mode before I start something where I'm just focused on, okay, we need to do this, we need to set this up, we need to set this up. But I knew as soon as we started recording, I'd be like, oh, this is Jack.
And that's what we did. We hit record and talked for a few minutes, and then boom, we started.
Yeah.
And, yeah. I'm feeling a lot better now. But yeah, yesterday I was very sort of consumed by my fear and whatnot, and I couldn't think of anything else. And then I had the idea, oh, fear. That's perfect. It's relevant, and yeah, I don't know. Considering the state of the world, I think a lot of people are dealing with it in one way or another.
So your idea was we each we can go back and forth, but you're talking about we each talk about 2 instances where we were dealing with stress, anxiety, or fear, and the way we managed it or dealt with it in that moment.
Certainly, yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
I like it.
Yeah. So I guess I'll start. So, yeah, like, you know, with COVID going on, like, a lot of people are afraid whether or not it's, yeah, you know, fear of getting sick, fear of losing your job, and economic stress and all of that. It's a scary time, and a couple of months ago, I was dealing with that very severely. I won't go into too much because we'll be here all night.
Well, you're in the high risk demo.
Yes,
right?
Yes, I am.
We can get into that later on if you want, but it's up to you.
Yeah, we can talk about that on another podcast. But yeah, I have a lot of health issues that make me high risk. So if I got COVID-19, I'd probably have a very rough time of it. And so. A couple of months ago, I'm sitting here in my apartment, and I start getting a scratchy throat, and I'm like, "Oh no, oh shit!" And then I'm like, "Didn't they say on the news that one of the first symptoms is a sore, scratchy throat?"
Actually, Jack, and, let's give a little context. Okay. How high risk are you? I mean, when we talk about things you've dealt with health-wise, or surgery-wise, or any of those things, can you kind of give like a broad context for that?
Okay, well, I was born with spina bifida, and long story short, because of that, it's led into I had kidney disease as well as high blood pressure, which is associated with that, and those are 2 of the high risk factors. And so, I mean, I don't want to say if I got COVID I would die, but there's a very good chance that I would.
Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't necessarily a case of hypochondria or anything like that. I think I had
that's why I wanted to give context. I thought, this was not a nothing burger. This was
It was very legit, and stupidly, there was that there was that thing circulating on social media at the time that COVID-19 hates heat. So if you start getting a sore throat, guzzle a bunch of hot water, which, disclaimer, is absolute nonsense. So don't do that. Don't bother. But I did that, and let me tell you, hot water is very hard to stomach. I literally started throwing up, and it wasn't nice. Anyway, so I proceeded to pace around my apartment for about 45 minutes and freaked out and was hyperventilating and all of those things. And then, Ian, I called you, my dear friend, and we sat in a Skype call for a couple hours and we talked about sort of life and death and the nature of it all.
Yeah, there was as your friend coming into the call, there were there were stages to the conversation. The first one was I could tell we couldn't actually like get into the meat and bones of what was bothering you because you were a ball of fear at the time.
And you knew immediately there was something up because
So the first thing to do was to sort of talk you down, deep breaths. Oh, we did a meditation technique. That was the thing we did.
Yeah, we did actually.
So we fired up the Headspace app. We listened to the Headspace for a little bit. But in the back of my mind, I was just kind of thinking about, has he never, I think given what you've been through, it requires a will to fight, bravery and courage and a will to fight, right? And I think that what I saw was you were reacting to this fear with that. You were trying to counter this fear with that. But you will to fight doesn't really apply to a virus is the problem. And so it wasn't really working during the conversation. And so we sort of, once you were in a calm place and we were just kind of talking, I sort of like touched on the idea of, I mean, it's me, so choice, right? So it's not just the virus. And I talked about mortality on the podcast a couple of weeks ago and just some thoughts I had on mortality and all of that. It's not just the virus. It's anything. I could go out and get hit by a bus. I could get a blood clot that goes to my brain, or I've had skin cancer twice. I mean, because there's one thing that's in the current conversation about mortality or health or whatever, it doesn't mean that any of those other things couldn't have already happened or couldn't be true. But how do I want... So at some point the ending comes. And the thing I kept thinking about with you was we don't get a choice all the time of that, but we get a choice... We sometimes get a choice and want to use it if it's there.
Would you say
for how we end.
You have a choice. You don't have a good choice, but you have a choice. Yeah.
Maybe. But I mean,
go on.
If you're gonna go, this was a tough conversation to get into, especially when I arrived in the call. But if you're gonna go, how do you want the ending to come? With if you get that choice, and we don't all get that choice, but if you get that choice, is it terrified and in fear, or am I reflecting on the things that I'm grateful for and just trying to make peace, or whatever, like, and when we were talking, I just didn't want you to be sort of driven purely on impulse with what you were dealing with in the moment, but to just kind of think about that.
I very much was. I was on autopilot and reactionary and all of those things.
Yeah. Which, I mean, of course. By the way, for anyone listening, if you've dealt with any of these things or any of that, just, no freaking judgment. No. Of course not. Yeah, like, everyone's on their own journey. Everyone has their own cocktail of... things to deal with and circumstances. We're just talking about this one conversation that you and I had.
Yeah, even one of the things we spoke about in that conversation was that my fear wasn't unwarranted. It's very normal in a global pandemic. Like, it's very understandable.
Yeah.
And very, yeah. I guess the trick is not letting that fear drag you away into a dark dungeon of your own mind or something.
Yeah, and I'm also not saying exactly. I'm not saying don't fight, or I'm not saying don't do the wise things. I'm not saying give up or any of that. I'm just saying, like, I'm not sure that or at least it wasn't working for you in that moment where trying to counter your own anxiety with the will to fight was really doing anything. If anything, I felt like it was winding you up more.
Yeah, I mean, because I was fighting in my head, but there was really nothing to fight because, like, whether I had COVID or not, I couldn't do anything about it in that moment. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, the thing I took away from that conversation was just, as you said, none of us really know how much time we have left, and whether I get hit by a bus tomorrow and die, or if I die when I'm 80, surrounded by my friends and family and chubby little grandchildren. I don't want to spend my life being afraid of that eventuality. You know. I think the antidote to that really was just to live and to be present and to like deal with what is happening rather than
Right.
what could happen.
And the thing was, like, again, no judgment, no negativity, no. We're not suggesting anyone. Fear is not a choice.
No.
That would be nonsense to say. But sort of what you do and the moments after and the perspective that's generating the fear and all of that can be interacted with, and other things can be considered. You can turn the prism, and get to a different space. And if you have that, if you realize that there's that freedom, and you have that freedom to, you start working on the muscle and allowing yourself to alter your perspective in a particular moment, then you kind of free yourself up. And like, if you and it's so miserable that if you have that ability, why would you not take advantage of it?
Right. Yeah.
You know,
and
not because you should, but because you would want to.
Right. Yeah. And if you are struggling with fear surrounding your own mortality, I would highly recommend watching the Good Place. That show is good for the soul, and because that was the conversation we had that led me into watching. No. We had finished the Good Place by then, and we talked about it, I think. But yeah, that show talks a lot about mortality and all of those things. And yeah, I don't want to spoil it, but yeah, definitely watch that if you're struggling.
So you kind of led with, my story sounds a little weird now, but we're just talking about instances of fear. So
it's all relative, man. It's all relative.
Going from fear of dying of COVID to a date that I went on. So yeah, I think I've actually told this story on the podcast, but it's relevant to this particular situation. I have a weird switch in my head, and I think it comes from my theater background. I started doing theater a little bit in elementary school and then junior high school, and then I did theater in high school. And it's a bizarre thing in a bubble, if you consider it. Memorizing things that someone else wrote and then stepping on stage in front of people and pretending to be someone you aren't, right? And so that is a weird mechanical kind of process. But what I would always note is that in the time before stepping on stage, I get the worst stage fright, cold sweats, hands shaking, terror. And then you step on stage and that character kind of reveals itself. You're not, a good performance, you find emotional connections to the performance that you're making. Yes, even the phone sex pervert, which was one of my performances. One of the characters I played on screen at one point. But not all the time. I'm just saying, like you look for those connections, and a switch flips, and you're trying to embody that person and that character. And even if you fall down or forget a line, what would the person in those circumstances say if they didn't remember the thing they were going to say in that moment? You know, and you sort of like, it's a weird thing. It's a very weird thing. So cut to, I think it was 2013. I'm living in San Francisco. I've been single for 2 years after being with a person and engaged for 7. And I'm just starting to do the OkCupid thing and to send messages and to do all of this. And I've messaged this woman once or twice, and I get a message from her saying, "Hey, I'm at a burger place on this street. Do you want to meet up?"
I love this story.
And I went, "Yeah, sure. I'll be right there." And then with hands free, so what happens is my fingers get cold and my hands start sweating. So with like sweaty, cold, clammy hands, I put on my riding jacket and I'm just like, and I'm hyperventilating, and I almost crashed my motorcycle twice on the way over to the burger place. And I get it parked and I get off the bike, and it's the worst stage fright I've ever had. And I just think I cannot go in there like this. I either have to call and cancel, or I have to deal with this right now. And I happened to look in the window of the front of the restaurant, and I saw her sitting in a booth. And seeing her made me think, what if she's as terrified as I am? Who would I have to be to put her completely at ease? And all of a sudden, all of my anxiety and fear just dissipated. It was like a breeze blew them out of me. And I just thought, okay, let's ask questions and let's listen to her, and let's go in there and just have a conversation. And I went in and we had a great time. But it was like a switch flipped in my head. And that's what I'm talking about when I talk about the fear is not a choice, but your perspective is. The perspective that you're indulging in the moment. And the perspective I was indulging was catastrophizing, I'm going to fuck this up. Pardon me, I'm in a cursy mood today. This is going to be messy and terrible. She's going to find out I'm a fraud. You know, the Wesley thing. And looking through the window and seeing another human being sitting there, alt is like my perspective, the prism turned. And I just thought about her and what she was looking for, and how I could make her laugh, and a story I could tell, and smiling at her and maintaining eye contact and all of that, and how that exuding warmth to make her as comfortable as possible. And it worked. All the voices, all that nonsense was still somewhere in me. I just got out of one bubble and into another, and the other bubble was far healthier and more productive. And our second date was terrible, but that date was really good.
Yeah, you told me that story a while ago when I was dealing with something similar, and it helped a lot. It really flipped the situation in my head for me, and yeah, I think that's a wonderful way to approach something like that, because I mean, chances are she was just as nervous as you were, right?
I mean, even if she wasn't, it still got me to a better place. This is the thing I said in the Guys Will Be Guys video. We all torture ourselves because of memories that we believe tell ourselves something awful about ourselves. But while the memories may be true, the interpretations are not. There's no truth in the interpretation. There's just what you believe and what you choose to do after. Contrary to what you might have thought, I actually believe the things that I write and put in the episode guides. And yeah, that was one particular instance where It really helped. The other place where that comes up a lot is getting on stage. I mean, we talked about that comes from a theater background, but when I speak at Comic-Cons, I just get terrified before I go up on stage. I hate it. I hate it. But as soon as I start talking, and as soon as I look at people's faces, and as soon as I make eye contact, I'm suddenly thinking about them and what can I do to make them feel welcome and interested. And it's like you just try, it sounds cheesy, but you just try and exude love and kindness from the stage, because that's what you feel like those people may need from you as a speaker in that moment. And it works. That switch flips, and suddenly I can just talk and be comfortable, and
Yeah. I tell you all the time that you're a natural showman, and it really comes across when you're on stage and doing those kinds of things. You're just really, really good at it, and you do it like exude all of those things that you were talking about. So, well done, sir. Well done.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Did you have another one you wanted to throw out?
Yeah. So another aspect of my life when it comes to confronting fear and managing it is so as I said before, I was born with spina bifida, and we'll go into that and another time, like what that is and whatnot, I'm sure. But as a result of that, I've had a lot of surgery. Like from the moment I was born, I had a 16-hour operation just to stop me from dying, essentially. And surgery is something that never gets easier. I find it terrifying every single time. And a part of that is, when you go under a general anesthetic, there is always a chance you're not going to wake up. It's slim, especially if you're only going in for something minor. Like, most people don't die. If you die, like, during surgery, it's typically not the anesthetic. It's because some other complications. So, especially if you're going in for something minor, your chances of dying are very, very slim. But it's always in the back of my mind. And when I was a kid, I didn't have a choice in the matter. My mother signs the consent form, and even if I'm kicking and screaming, I'm going in and I'm getting it done. It's just, you're a kid. You have to do as you're told, essentially. But then, as I became an adult and, the surgeries continued, I was at a point where it was completely up to me. And at any moment, I could walk out. I've even been in... there's a room outside of the operating theater they call the anesthetic bay, and it's where they sort of prep you to be knocked out. And even in that room, I told the doctor how scared I was and how I didn't want to do it. And he's like, you can still walk out of here if you want to. And I'm like, well, no, I mean, yes, I can, but I really can't, because every surgery that I've had has been necessary. It's whether it's been to, like I've had kidney stones many times, and giant kidney stones that I can't pass. So they have to be surgically removed. And so what I'm trying to say is, a roundabout way of saying is just that part of the way I deal with that fear is just knowing that it's for the great and the good. And without it, I'm either going to get sick or just have a really rough time with things,
So you're saying that in the face of something that looks terrifying, you place it in a larger context in your head. So,
exactly.
So it's sort of like this is suffering, or there's a chance of this, but it's momentary compared to the opportunity to live longer,
exactly,
and to be healthier for a longer period of time.
Yeah, and I more or less just tell myself that even though now as an adult I signed the consent form and I submit myself to it, I don't really have a choice. Like, I do, but I don't, because it has to be done.
Yeah.
And so every time I go in, I do sort of prepare myself for the possibility that I might die. And you know, the moment I wake up, I'm like, oh, thank God. Like, I mean, I feel like I've been hit by a freight train. If you've ever woken up from a general anesthetic, it's a very uncomfortable experience.
Yeah.
Dizziness, and you know, your mouth's really dry, but there's always this feeling of, oh sweet, I didn't die this time. Cool.
Sweet ass.
Cool. Yeah. But yeah, I also just want to say, for anyone, if you're about to have surgery or whatever, don't take me as an example. Like, chances are you are gonna be absolutely fine. I'm just a bit of a scaredy cat in that regard.
That's all we're talking about.
Yeah. You got something else?
Yeah, I had a recent one. This just popped into my head. When you brought up this idea, I was just trying to think of recent I've been dealing with a lot of recent instances of fear that I'm not going to talk about around something else, but I would say in the last 7 years I've gone through so much change and growth compared to any other period of my life, save for maybe learning the English language and how to walk. That was
just in the time.
Yeah,
just in the time I've known you, I've seen you come such a long way.
And when you go through periods like that, I think that sometimes relationships lag behind. Family relationships, friend relationships. I tend to mate for life. I hope you realize, Jack, that you and I are going to be 60-year-old men talking about these things.
I look forward to it, man. I got myself into this mess, and I am resigned to my fate.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, though, the ways of, even if you're going through a whole bunch of change, ways of being in particular relationships don't always come along because they're not going through the same thing that you are. And so I found myself pissing off someone close to me at a point, and I hate confrontation. It fills me with dread and terror, clammy hands, and we talked about earlier that sort of abandonment and appeasement or descent into narcissism possibility, where I sort of swirl around in those spaces and think I'm doing the right thing and then make them more upset and then try and fix it and make them more upset and so forth. And their anger fills me with sort of fear and resistance and all of that. And I was talking with my dad about this, saying, like, I need to figure this out because the way that I'm reacting makes me miserable and is actually making this situation worse. And, this person and I have known each other for a long time. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of behavior patterns that have been around since we were young, right? And ones that don't serve either of us. But the thing that was getting me was, like, I was spiraling, where one interaction and I would be arguing or talking with them in my head. You ever have that a disagreement with a person? And you're just like saying all the other things you could have said, or truth. Yeah. Like, what if I had said this? Would it have fixed the situation?
Years later, too. Years and years later, I've won so many arguments in my head.
And I mean, so that kind of growth or that confidence that I've gained over the past few years doesn't always permeate into relationships where there are old or sort of unhealthy ways that we might have of interacting with each other. And I said, I'm just like, it's making me nervous and I'm stressed out and whatever. And my dad said, they're not a bear. There's nothing to be afraid of. And putting things in that context, of actual life and death and actual fear and actual, I'm not one for comparing fears or comparing suffering between people or relationships or any of that. But just for me personally, in that moment, talking about like, you're going to be okay. It was what I needed to hear in that moment, to go, oh, this is all just fear. This isn't me sort of trying to find a healthy way of communicating or a good place for us both or minimizing damage. This is that fear response that we started out by talking about originally existed to keep us from being eaten by bears or to stick our hand in the fire, but now overreacts and runs hot all the time. And just it was the right words at the right time where I went, oh, everything's fine. Yeah, we'll figure this out. We'll resolve this. Everything's fine. And someone being mad at me, not the worst thing right now. It's okay.
Right.
Like, as long as we're both healthy and taking care of ourselves or whatever it may be, everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
So it was perspective. Again, I think most of these get back to perspective shifts.
Certainly, yeah. Yeah. Like, the whole thing about, like, the modern world, right? We do have these evolutionary traits about fear, and you said we don't have to run away from bears or dinosaurs anymore or whatever. And I think a huge part of why we struggle with fear in the modern world is because a lot of the things that we're afraid of aren't super obvious. We don't see lions chasing us, and
we're so comfortable and safe.
Exactly, and that's why I think panic disorders exist and all of those things, because it's like, I don't know, and I suppose a part of it too is we're always more afraid of things that we can't see or the things that we don't understand. Like the monster in the darkness that we can't see, and all of those kinds of things.
Yeah, which is funny because, well, anyway. So if you're listening and have dealt with a scary or panic situation and found a way through it and want to share, leave a comment down below.
Yeah, by all means. We'll both be checking out the comments and trying to respond and whatnot.
Yes, and you'll give us things to talk about.
Yes. Oh, yes. If you would like us to cover anything, please let us know.
Respond in a tweet, ask questions, please. Interact.
Yeah, certainly.
Doing this on my own was tough. Jack's here. That's going to help a lot. But if you enjoy listening to us talk and want us to talk about something in particular, including top 5 favorite sexual positions, nothing is off the table. Are we really saying that? Is nothing off the table, Jack?
Yeah, well, you just said it, so I guess we are.
All right, this week I'm working on the script for Fool for Love. I've done a couple run-throughs of it now, and I'm trying to center in on my approach to the episode. I actually think this morning I figured out my approach. It's an interesting episode to talk about. It's an episode 7, so there are tons and tons of things. I actually am not going to be able to do it complete justice until we get to the gift, because I write spoiler-free, but there's a ton of stuff about Spike and some things I've been going through recently that made me think about the story of the episode and start thinking about things like love and intimacy and relationships and all of that I think I can find an essay that I find interesting in there someplace, which is, for me, the thing I'm normally shooting for. And then I just hope that everyone else enjoys it the same. I still have the commentary. I don't know what my note meant here. Still have the commentary track.
Me neither, actually. I was looking at it going, what commentary track?
Oh, so my friend Lonnie and I recorded a commentary track to Passengers. And we need to get that edited and put up. That was a very interesting discussion on a very broken in an interesting way that I love movie. Problematic is perhaps overused, but it's not even that. It is problematic, but I don't actually think that's its biggest issue. But anyway, I need to get that edited and out to you guys, and I'm still working on the novel. So I've been cribbing on Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet is 5 acts, and then with the scenes laid out within the acts. I finished Act 1 and started on Act 2 in the book. So I've got about 12,000 words written. There's definitely an ebb and a flow. Sometimes it's very difficult to sit down, and I do about an hour a day. And I'm trying to get an exercise groove going, which for me, since it's in the high 90s outside right now, means VR.
Amen, brother, amen.
What about you, Jack? What are you up to this week?
Well, I'm editing a bunch of Patreon readings. Some, I think 4 or 5 are ready to go right now. So if you're a patron, keep an eye out for those. Right now, I'm working on a reading of from The Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus, which I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with. I'm super excited for that one. And yeah, once we've caught up and got everything delivered, we'll also be reaching out again to patrons for the next round. So yeah, keep an eye out for that, and have a think about what you would like to hear our sultry voiced friend here reading. And yeah, on a personal front, I'm also focusing on diet and exercise. I won't go into it too much now, maybe another time, but I was recently diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, which is just another item on the cavalcade of health issues for me. But that's been a lot of work and very confronting and whatnot. But I'm doing better now, and I'm dealing. But that's something that's it's a heavy focus right now as well.
You've been doing amazing with it.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. It's actually funny because I've been eating better food now than I was beforehand. And part of the whole thing to me was, like, my life is over. I'll never be able to eat good food again.
I remember we talked.
Yeah, yeah, we did. We talked a lot. And another ledge that you talked me down off of. But, yeah.
All right, good deal. Okay, well, before we get to the fanfic reading, I just want to let you know that I'm at Ian Nittram. That's my first name and last name spelled backwards on Twitter. And it's youtube.com/passionofthenerd. Jack, where can the people hear more from you?
You can find me on Twitter at lackofsurprise1. That's all one word with a number 1 at the end. You can also find me in the Passion of the Nerd Discord server. I'm Jack Spraddington on there. And you can also join us in the Passionate Nerds Facebook group. We've got a nice, friendly little community there. So yeah, come and say hi.
This community is also super kind. If you'd like to support the channel and keep Jack and me flush with Diet Sprite and dollary dues, you can do so at patreon.com/passionofthenerd. With the $5 and up club, you can join us in the Hangouts in 2 weeks, where we're going to talk about the Angel episode Blind Date. We're wrapping up Buffy Season 4, Angel Season 1 in the discussion. Those have been great.
Or you can also support us by grabbing yourself something from the passionofthenerd.com/store. Shirts, mugs, phone cases. I think we have. There's a bunch of great stuff there. If you'd like to get yourself some merch.
And if you're in it, we need to work on that merch store too. We need more stuff. Anyone who's a designer or an artist and wants to donate to the channel but doesn't have money but doesn't care about a drawing, please, thepassionofthenerd@gmail.com if you want to help us out. I would be eternally grateful.
hit us up. That would be wonderful.
If you're an Amazon Prime member, you may not realize this, but you can support us for free by using your monthly Amazon Prime Twitch subscription at twitch.tv/thepassionofthenerd. If you actually use Twitch, though, and follow streamers, do not give me your subscriber. Give it to people who actually do what Twitch is for, please. So let's go over to the fanfic reading. Here is Gone, Terri Botta. Here is Gone, Terri Botta, chapter 23. Previous chapters are in the show notes. For the next couple of days, Spike sulked in his crypt. He'd gone out only once during his fit of pique, and that had been to assist Buffy with a vampire. He remembered helping her from before, remembered taunting her about her looks and her inability to keep a man, but this time he was oddly quiet. He saw the vamp slam her backwards and moved in for the kill. He dusted it and stepped back, waiting for Buffy to yell at him for getting in her way, but she hadn't. They made pleasantries, just as they had the night Olaf was in the bronze. He asked her about her mother, and she replied that Joyce was recovering, but that the house was a mess. She then complained about her classes and the cutting remarks a professor had made. He had listened and confirmed her belief that Rasputin was indeed a demon. Her smile had warmed him, and he wondered if she really didn't know how intelligent she was. He knew she hated school, that studying was a hardship for her, but he also knew that she had done fairly well on her SAT scores. Buffy was far from stupid, but like so many young people in modern times, the antiquated teaching methods of the schools failed to create an environment that made learning interesting for her. Without her mind engaged and interested, she simply didn't apply herself. Instead, she allowed her low grade point average to convince her that she was dumb, and accepted the common belief that she was not fit for higher education. He wondered how she would do in a small, personalized situation where her quick mind was fed all the right things. He had no doubt that she'd surprise everyone, herself most of all. Their little, non-violent interaction had been pleasant, and he had returned to his crypt a little lighter-hearted than he had before. It wore off in a few hours, though, when he was left alone with his memories and nightmares, and the firm belief that nothing he could do would make any difference. It wasn't enough to make him give up, however, and he did tidy up his crypt in anticipation of the council of wankers barging in to interview him. They showed up right on time, crossbow and crucifix in hand, to ask questions about Buffy and her work. Sold, but still prone to impatience with obvious hubris, he played with them a bit, feeding them stories of his and Buffy's adventures and flirting with the young woman. It had been fun to yank them around, and he'd actually felt quite a bit better after they'd gone. Part of this was because he knew he had helped Buffy a great deal in making her look like the Super Slayer in the eyes of the Council, and the other part was his evil smugness in knowing he was light years ahead of them, in knowing what was going on with Glory, the hell bitch. After they left, he aired out the place to get rid of the smell of stuffed shirts and tidied up some more because he knew Buffy would be bringing Joyce and Dawn over for him to watch and protect. Then he settled in to take a nap. He knew Buffy would wake him when she brought her mother and sister over, and he didn't want it to look like he had been expecting company. She woke him up a few hours later by slamming the door and shining sunlight on him. He leapt up startled, ready to fight, then relaxed when he saw her. "Oh, it's the Slayer," he commented, wiping the sleep from his eyes. "For a second there, I was worried." He nodded his head towards Joyce and Dawn, who were standing behind Buffy looking rather uncertain. "What's with the family outing?" he asked. Buffy came close and he focused on her. She looked worn and frightened, and he once again fought the urge to reach out. He almost choked on it, that and the knowledge that she saw him as nothing more than a monster to be used and discarded at her convenience. I need your help," she said earnestly. He snarked at her before demanding cash, but this time he softened and leaned close. "Where is it? Is there danger?" The look in her eyes told him everything he needed to know about her surprise and her gratitude. "See, there's a man in this monster. A man who loves you and will do anything for you. Can you bring yourself to see him, Buffy?" "You have to look after them," she said in a serious voice. He pretended to be affronted. It was no good to be too helpful. Being too helpful usually earned him a few bruises. "Whoa! That's a buttload of manly responsibility to come out of nowhere. What's the matter, Slayer? Not feeling 100%? She shook her head and crinkled her nose. "No, He decided to tease her a bit. It would make her feel better if he acted normal. "They didn't put a chip in your head, did they?" "No. Be funny if they did," he said, licking his teeth and smirking. She lost patience and frowned. "I need an answer. Now. In or out, Spike?" At his pensive look, she added quietly, "You're the only one strong enough to protect them." "No, I'm not. I'm a colossal failure at it. But I swear this time around I'll do better." He gave her a tender smile, confirming her belief that preying on his male ego had convinced him to help her, when just the opposite was true. "All right, then," he agreed, then turned to Joyce and Dawn. "Ladies, come in. Plenty of blood in the fridge." "You mean like real blood?" Dawn asked, taking a few tentative steps forward. He raised an eyebrow at her. "What do you think?" She crinkled her nose in distaste, just the way Buffy did when she was squeamish. "Mostly I think ew." "Mom, keep Dawn here as long as you can. I'll be back as soon as I can," Buffy told her mother, then turned to Spike. "I know I don't have to tell you this." He smirked and rolled his eyes. Yeah. Anything happens to him, so I'll stake you good and proper. Sing me a new one sometime, eh, pet? That bit's gone stale." She looked as if she was going to retort something, then decided against it. Shaking her head and giving her mother one last reassuring glance, she hurried out. Spike looked at his remaining two reluctant guests as they cast concerned glances around the room. Poor Joyce looked as out of place as a skinhead at a Mormon convention. I love what you've neglected to do with the place," Joyce finally offered nervously. He smiled and welcomed them in, going to the beat-up television, knowing that Joyce liked Passions as much as he did, and moving to turn the TV on. "Just don't break anything, and don't make a lot of noise. Passions is coming on," he said. That got Joyce's attention, as he knew it would, and she came forward to sit in the old armchair in front of the televisions. "Passions? Oh, do you think Timmy's really dead?" He sat next to her on the arm of the chair. "Oh, no. She can't just sew him back together. He's a doll, for God's sake." "What about the wedding? There's no way they're going through with that." He smiled to himself, happy to have them there, if only for a short while. He was aware of Dawn's impatience and their preoccupation with soap operas, but he left her to do her schoolwork, as he had, and Joyce and he sat by the glow of the television. 2 hours later, Joyce was asleep in the chair, Spike's tattered blanket tucked around her shoulders, while he and Dawn played cards for snack mix on the other side of the table. "Gin!" Dawn exclaimed quietly, and Spike scowled. "Oi, Nibbler, you've got me again," he groused, as she dumped the stakes bowl of snack mix into her own winnings bowl. She laughed, giving him a coy look. She'd been flirting with him ever since her mother had fallen asleep, and he turned his attention to the bored teenager. You're not letting me win, are you?" she asked shyly. "Don't have to, Bit. You're a natural. Besides, you think I like losing all of my Chex Mix, do you? Stuff's expensive, you know." "I think it's funny that a vampire has real food. I mean, what do you do with it?" "We eat it, of course." "But don't vampires eat blood?" "Well, yeah, but that doesn't mean I can't enjoy other stuff." Dawn shrugged as she shuffled the cards. Angel never ate any human food. He took the cards from her and shuffled them himself. "Yeah, well, Angel's a wanker." She giggled and watched as he dealt another hand, each then looking at their cards and placing their wagers in the stakes bowl. "This is fun," she said after a short while as they played, "and you're really good at it." "Yeah, well, you grow up in a time without television or radios. Got to do something to pass the time. Cards, board games, reading. Made the nights go faster." "I always thought that was why Victorians had such big families," she joked with a grin. He smirked and shook his head. "Not going there with you, sweet bit. Sexual relations in the Victorian era were not compatible in any way." She leaned close and whispered in a conspiring tone, "I once looked up a book in the library called My Secret Life. I snuck it out of the adults section. There were 4 volumes of this guy talking about his sex life in Victorian England. He'd go to whorehouses to have sex because his wife wasn't supposed to enjoy having sex with him." He leaned back and lit a cigarette. "Yeah, that'd be about right. That whole wifely duty thing." He stopped himself and gave her a piercing glance. "And did I not say I was not discussing this with you, young lady?" She laughed, her eyes dancing. "So what did you do those cold Victorian nights?" He took a drag from the cigarette. "If you tell anyone this, I will find a way to kill you, understand?" Her eyes widened a little, but she leaned close expectantly. "I was a proper English gentleman. I never even thought those dirty thoughts." She giggled. "You? I was. And I played cards and board games with my mom and little sis on those cold Victorian nights." She blinked at his words. "You had a little sister?" He nodded, even as his heart sank. He hadn't wanted to speak of his family, but she'd gotten him into it. Sneaky little chit. Closing his eyes and crushing out his cigarette on the stone floor, "I did." He hoped that she would now let it go, but she was like a pit bull with a bone. What was she like? What was her name? He sighed, calling up his sister's sweet face from memory. They had the same blue eyes, same nose, and the same wavy, sandy brown hair. Anne. Her name was Anne, and she was a lot like you. She was. He smiled, remembering Anne's laughter, and took a sip from the beer he'd been nursing for the past half hour. Yeah, she was smart, pretty like you, bit. She had a habit of asking the wrong questions at the wrong time. 2 peas in a pod we were. I adored her, and she adored me. Did you kill her? Dawn asked suddenly. He choked and spit his mouth full of beer all over the floor, startling Dawn and making her scramble back. What? He gasped, staring at her in horror and wiping his mouth. She looked guilty and ashamed. Buffy always said that when you became a vampire, you go back and kill your family. Did she now? He snapped, making Dawn flinch. I wonder where she got that idea. I don't know. Now you listen, Missy, you listen good. Just because Darling Angelus got a hankering to massacre his folks does not mean all of us go out and eat the ones who raised us after getting turned, he snarled. Oh, okay. Angelus hated his father, and from what I've heard, the feeling was mutual. He was a womanizing drunkard who would have died from the claps sooner or later, he continued, ignoring how he was scaring Dawn. He was a bastard in life, and he was an even bigger bastard in unlife. His brooding soullessness would like you to believe that all us vampires are just like him, but the truth of it is, he was the worst of the lot. Not even Darla, depraved bitch that she was, would do some of the things her precious child did without a blink. He paused, clenching his fists, not registering that Dawn had pressed herself against the crypt wall because he'd shifted into game phase. What he did to Drew, driving her mad, killing her family, and making her think the sight was a curse from the devil, that was evil. At least when I went hunting, I killed 'em quick. Even the ones I did with the railroad spike. Once I got round to doing it, I slammed it through 'em right quick. Done. Gone. No messing around. I got 'em, let 'em know who I was, let 'em know that I was the one who they'd humiliated and abused, and rammed the spike through their heads. They'd never make fun of me again, the blighters. He came out of his rant to finally see Dawn cowering away from him and realized that he'd been scaring her. Touching his forehead, he felt the demon ridges and forced himself to shift back to human face. Sorry about that bit. I pop off sometimes, especially when I have to deal with anything having to do with Angelus. Seeing his human face again made her relax a little, and she offered him an apologetic smile. You don't like him much. He lit another cigarette. Who? The Grand Poof. I hate his guts. Got all sold after eating that gypsy girl and abandoned me and Drew. Drew cried for weeks. I couldn't console her. She nearly got us killed dozens of times with her wailing and sloppy kills. Then he's here in sunny hell when I bring Drew here to get well after that mob in Prague almost killed her. Being all heroic-like and working against us, helping the Slayer. Goes and gets himself a happy and turns all evil bastard on us again. Takes Drew from me. Tries to destroy the bloody world. I got lots of reasons to hate that wanker. He's all depresso boy and his hair sticks up, she added. He took a drag from his cigarette. He's a poof. What do you expect? Pillock's in love with his hair gel. Dawn giggled and uncurled. Then she gave him an apologetic smile. I'm sorry I made you mad. Don't worry about it, Sweetbit. You didn't know any better. And to answer your question, no, I did not kill Anne. Anne died of consumption at the tender age of 14, leaving me as mother's only surviving child, he answered calmly. What happened to her after you died? He looked down sadly, remembering. It broke her heart. I wanted to see her, let her know I wasn't really gone, but it was too dangerous. Even then I knew Angelus would kill her if he knew where she was. You protected her? He nodded. Worked with a barrister behind the scenes. Got it arranged for her to live with her sister in Yorkshire. I was there the night she left on the evening train. She didn't see me. It was the last time I saw her. She died 6 years later. We didn't live long in those days. At least she died safe, Dawn said, and he turned to see that she'd crawled up next to him and was at his shoulder. Suppose so, he answered, not entirely comfortable with her closeness. You know what I think? I think Anne was very lucky to have a brother like you, she said, placing a hand on his shoulder. At least she knew you loved her. It's more than what I have. His head whipped around toward her. What do you mean? Dawn swallowed. Remember when I asked you if I was real? What I told you that 2 crazy guys said I wasn't really there? He creased his brow and nodded. Well, it happened again, only this time it was Mom who said it. She called me a thing, told me to get away from her. When was this? She was in the hospital, and the night she came home and that icky space bug attacked us. Oh, Bit. She wasn't in her right mind. You can't take anything she says seriously, he comforted. Dawn shook her head. There's more. Giles, Mom, and Buffy, they talk about me when they think I can't hear. There's something going on that they don't want me to know about. I think it has something to do with that demon Glory, the one who came to the house today. Glory came to your house? He blurted. He'd never known the exact reason why Buffy had brought Joyce and Dawn to him that afternoon. Now he knew, and he was shocked by Buffy's show of faith. She nodded. Yeah, she was in the living room. She threatened Buffy. That's when Buffy brought Mom and me here. Big Sis is putting a lot of faith in one vamp. Dawn shrugged. She knew we'd be safe here. Glory doesn't know about you, and she'd never think that Buffy would take us to a vampire for protection. Spike considered that and agreed. Glory's looking for a key. She thinks Buffy has it. She wanted to know. Glory's looking for a key. She thinks Buffy has it. She wanted to know if I knew where it was. Do you know what Glory's looking for, Spike? He knew he couldn't lie, but he also couldn't tell her the truth, so he hedged and said, Got an inkling, but I'm not exactly part of the Scuba inner sanctum. They don't really keep me in the loop. I know it's important, and that Glory can't ever get her hands on it. But what does that have to do with me? She asked earnestly, and the look on her face nearly broke his heart. I'm sure that whatever it is, they're just trying to keep you safe, he told her honestly, then motioned to the forgotten cards. Now come on. It's your turn to draw. Got to win back my Chex Mix, you know. Dawn gave him a little smile and moved to pick up her hand. He picked up his and looked at them, reminding himself of the hand that he had been drawn, but his mind was elsewhere. Her words bothered him because he knew that she was figuring out things for herself, and he remembered how well her discovery that she was the key had gone over last time. Rearranging his hand into a more logical pattern, he added convincing Giles to tell Dawn she was the key to his list of things to do. Pillock's better tell her before she finds out about it herself, he thought, taking a card from the pile and discarding another. Dawn snatched it up with a triumphant grin and clapped down her cards. Gin! He sighed and rolled his eyes as she took her winnings. Bint better get back here before little sis cleans me on a Chex Mix. This chapter is a good reminder of the fact that this story was written at the end of season 6. It was written in the summertime between season 6 and 7. So she didn't actually know all the direction things were going, but it's fine. I'm still having a good time. All right. Back to Jack and I. We come back. All right. Well, you did it.
I did it. I did.
Yeah.
And it was like everything or most things. It wasn't as scary as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. What things are
a lot of fun?
What things are as scary as you think they're going to be?
Lions, bears.
Lions are pretty scary.
Sharks.
I don't know. I've never seen a lion, a bear, or a shark up front. Maybe they're super nice. Spiders.
I live in Australia, so we have a bunch of tiny little things that can sting you and kill you in 20 minutes. They're pretty scary.
Root canals are as scary as they actually are. It's funny. All the science of everything has come along an incredible amount over the since I've been alive. But dentistry still feels medieval. It still feels like someone jamming their hands in your mouth with a pair of pliers and pulling something out. Or, why don't we have robots, Jack, that are, you take a little nap? Or you don't even have to open your mouth, really. It can do a root canal, like, front through your cheek.
I actually need to get a root canal, so thanks for reminding me of that, Ian. Thanks.
That's awkward. That's my bad.
Thanks.
All right, Jack. Well, I really appreciate you being here. I hope you had fun.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I really did. And thanks for inviting me to be a part of this. It should be a lot of fun, and I'm really excited, and I can't wait to see what we can come up with.
Yeah, I agree. This will be an evolving thing. I've said that the podcast is always a thing in flux as we try and find things we're happy with, things that work, things that are a benefit to both us being here and people listening. So, and if you're out there listening, we appreciate your time. It's a weird time for everyone, but the one constant is we are all in it together. So you're not alone.
Amen, brother. Amen. And yeah, leave us some comments down below, and we'll do our best.
Yeah, we'll chat you back,
reply and whatnot. Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much. Have a great week, everybody.
Goodbye.